Throughout history, women have shared an intimate, often overlooked bond with the plant world, one that extends far beyond gardening or foraging. From the guardians of indigenous medicine to suffragettes wielding flowers as symbols of defiance, women have turned botanical knowledge into a quiet but persistent form of resistance. Plants have been their allies in survival, healing, and rebellion. Whether through preserving food in times of famine, practicing forbidden herbal medicine, or challenging colonial powers with the wisdom of the land, women have safeguarded knowledge that was often dismissed, suppressed, or even punished. Yet, in every era, they found ways to resist, passing their expertise through whispers, rituals, and seeds sown in defiance. This journey takes us across continents and centuries, uncovering the stories of women who harnessed the power of nature not just to endure, but to challenge, heal, and transform their worlds. Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Roots Revealed. I'm Binish aka Beans, your guide to the fascinating history, culture, and science of plants. Together we'll uncover how plants have shaped civilizations, ecosystems, and our understanding of the natural world. Let's kick off with the next episode. Indigenous women have long been the keepers of vital plant knowledge. Their expertise in horticulture, wild edibles, and medicinal plants served not only as sustenance but also as a powerful form of resistance against European colonization. Their story begins long before European contact, when these women held respected positions in their communities as knowledge holders and healers. When the Portuguese and French began colonizing Brazil in the 1500s, they relied on indigenous women to teach them how to cultivate native crops, including peanuts, cashews, and pumpkins. But as European influence grew, these women's expertise was first diminished, then rewritten, and ultimately erased. The Jesuits, who sought to reshape indigenous society, discouraged women from working in the fields and replaced them with men and enslaved laborers. In time, colonial texts stopped crediting indigenous women altogether. In Chiapas, Mexico, Tzotzil Mayan women preserved another form of resistance, foraging and maintaining knowledge of wild edible plants. As European colonization sought to replace indigenous traditions with Western agriculture, these women continued gathering nettles, dandelions, and wild sorrel, ensuring their families had food even when resources were scarce. This practice wasn't just about survival, it was an act of defiance against cultural erasure. Indigenous women's connection to plants extended beyond food to spiritual and medicinal practices, defying colonial bans on indigenous rituals. Across the Americas, women secretly used psychoactive plants like yerba mate and tobacco in spiritual ceremonies, defying colonial bans on indigenous rituals. Some took a more direct approach, using plant-based poisons to resist colonization. There are records of indigenous women who allegedly poisoned colonial officials or used medicinal herbs to heal warriors fighting against the European invaders. Even in the face of forced migration and slavery, women found ways to use plants to reclaim control over their bodies. During the transatlantic slave trade, African and indigenous women were subjected to brutal violence, including reproductive exploitation. But the knowledge of cottonwood bark, peacock flower, rue, and tansy gave them a secret weapon: the ability to prevent pregnancies. Enslaved women in the Americas and the Caribbean chewed fresh cotton root bark to induce menstruation or miscarriage, allowing them to resist the horrific reality of forced childbearing for profit. This practice was so widespread that slaveholders attempted to restrict access to these plants, but women found ways to keep the knowledge alive, whispering it from mother to daughter, ensuring that even in the most dehumanizing conditions, they had a form of bodily autonomy. As colonization spread, so did the efforts to suppress indigenous and enslaved women's expertise in plant medicine. In North America, indigenous women exchanged medicinal plant knowledge with European settlers, enriching both communities. But while settlers benefited from this wisdom, indigenous women continued to face displacement, their lands stolen, and their traditions targeted. Still, they persisted, using plants not only as medicine but as symbols of resilience. Even as colonization and slavery tried to erase their knowledge, indigenous and enslaved women held on to it, using plants for healing, protection, and quiet resistance. Their wisdom shaped traditions, supported survival, and endured despite efforts to suppress it. Today, this legacy continues in the fight for indigenous rights, environmental justice, and the protection of traditional knowledge. As we move from the Americas to medieval Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, we find another group of women who played a vital yet often dangerous role as healers and keepers of herbal knowledge. During this time, when the Catholic Church wielded significant influence and witch trials were becoming more frequent, these women remained committed to preserving and practicing their botanical expertise. Many of these healers possessed extensive plant knowledge, refined over generations of practical use. Their understanding went far beyond simple folk remedies. They knew how to use plants like belladonna, mandrake, and henbane to treat pain, infections, and complications during pregnancy and childbirth. These women, later branded as witches, were the cornerstone of community health care, serving as herbalists, midwives, and healers. Their wisdom was passed down from mother to daughter, forming an unbroken chain that sustained their communities for centuries. What made these healers remarkable was their empirical approach to medicine. Unlike religious authorities, they relied on observation, experimentation, and experience rather than faith or doctrine. They discovered that ergot, a fungus growing on rye, could ease childbirth pain, defying the church's belief that such pain was divine punishment for Eve's original sin. Ergot derivatives are still used in modern medicine today. Similarly, they found that belladonna could prevent miscarriage by inhibiting uterine contractions, an effect still valued in modern antispasmodic medication. Even foxglove, which led to the development of a crucial heart medication, is believed to have been first used by an English witch healer. However, this powerful knowledge soon became a source of conflict. As institutional medicine controlled by male clergy and university-trained physicians gained prominence, women healers were seen as threats to the established order. Their independence defied the patriarchal structure of medieval society, and the church viewed them with particular suspicion. These women represented a triple threat. They defied gender norms, formed underground networks of peasant healers, and practiced medicine based on empirical evidence rather than religious doctrine. This tension led to the tragic witch trials, where many women healers were persecuted. The label of witch was often used to discredit and suppress their expertise. Yet, despite the danger, many continued to practice in secret, providing remedies to those who could not afford or access formal medical care. Their quiet defiance, continuing to heal and teach, became an act of resistance against those who sought to silence them. Their healing traditions often intertwined with spiritual and cultural practices outside church control, allowing them to maintain alternative worldviews that honored women as healers and leaders. By preserving these traditions, they resisted the erasure of women's role in healthcare and maintained their authority in healing even under persecution. Modern herbalism and natural medicine owe much to their discoveries and methods. These women were not merely practitioners of folk medicine. They were pioneers who trusted their observations, fought for autonomy, and ensured their invaluable knowledge survived despite relentless efforts to suppress it. While medieval women healers faced persecution for their knowledge of plants during witch trials, their legacy endured. Centuries later, during the Irish potato famine, women's botanical expertise became essential once again, this time for survival. The famine, which began in 1845, was one of history's darkest periods of colonial oppression. Ireland, under the British rule, functioned as a colony despite its proximity to Britain. As potato blight devastated crops, the British government continued exporting grain and livestock from Irish lands, leaving families to starve under policies that prioritized profit over human life. Faced with empty fields and dwindling supplies, communities had to rely on whatever resources they could find, and it was often women who led the way, turning to the land for sustenance and survival. Using their deep knowledge of plants and natural resources, women tried to keep their communities alive. As expert foragers, they identified wild plants like nettles, chickweed, sorrel, and wild garlic to supplement meager diets. This was more than survival. It was defiance against a system designed to starve them. Women ventured out in groups, sharing knowledge of edible plants and preparation methods. They stretched scarce resources, creating soups and stews to feed as many as possible. Beyond food, these women were skilled herbalists. They used plants like comfrey, elderberry, and dandelion to treat malnutrition and illness. They preserved what they could, making jams from wild berries and fermenting vegetables to last through the harshest months. Their resistance took many forms. Some organized potato protests, raiding fields and storehouses to feed their starving families. Others established support networks like the Belfast Ladies Association for the Relief of Irish Destitution, which raised over £2,000 by March 1847 for aid. Women like Mary Ann McCracken and Maria Edgeworth used their influence to advocate for the poor, securing international support. Tenant farming women also took action. They wrote petitions for assistance and joined food riots, protesting the continued export of food while their neighbors starved. In areas like Shull and Skibbereen, where famine was particularly severe, Women's Association played a crucial role distributing food and clothing to save countless lives. Their solidarity was remarkable. Women formed informal networks to share resources, ensuring that women and the elderly received care. They bartered and traded handmade goods for food, working together to maintain a fragile sense of normalcy. This period offers a different view of the famine, one where women were not passive victims but fierce protectors of their communities. Through their resilience, ingenuity, and deep-rooted knowledge of the land, they turned plants into weapons of survival and defiance. Their legacy is not just one of endurance, but of quiet revolution, an enduring reminder that even in the darkest times, knowledge and solidarity can be acts of resistance. From survival during famine to political revolution, women found power in plants. By the late 19th century, the suffragette movement transformed flowers into symbols of political resistance. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as women organized to demand the right to vote, they didn't rely solely on speeches and protests. They wielded flowers and plants as powerful tools in their fight against oppression. The suffragette movement, led by figures like Emmeline Pankhurst in the UK and Susan B. Anthony in the US, saw women boldly entering public and political spaces long denied to them. These activists organized marches, staged demonstrations, and endured hunger strikes, often facing arrests and harsh treatment for demanding equality. Amid this struggle, they discovered that nature itself could become a powerful ally. Flowers became a secret language for the suffragettes, allowing them to communicate values and unity in ways that were both beautiful and subversive. In the United Kingdom, the movement adopted specific colors represented through carefully chosen flowers: purple for dignity, white for purity, and green for hope, creating a recognizable visual identity. British suffragettes drew on florography, the Victorian language of flowers, where each bloom carried meaning. Violets symbolized loyalty, lilies represented purity of intention, yellow roses stood for friendship and solidarity, and ivy signified fidelity and resilience. As the movement progressed, different regions adopted their own floral emblems. In the United States, the Massachusetts Women's Suffrage Association chose the bluebird, while Kansas suffragists rallied behind the sunflower. In Maine, suffragists selected the golden jonquil or daffodil as their symbol, a practical choice since it could be worn year-round and forced to bloom by florists. The yellow jonquil became increasingly significant as a contrast to the red rose adopted by the Women's Anti-Suffrage Association. This floral rivalry reached a dramatic climax in 1920 in Nashville, Tennessee, where suffragists and anti-suffragists lobbied the state legislature over the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Tennessee was poised to become the crucial 36th state needed to ratify the amendment. During this intense showdown, both sides wore rose-shaped pins to declare their stance: yellow roses for suffrage supporters and red roses for opponents. The simple act of wearing a flower became a political statement in this pivotal moment. Beyond symbolism, flowers allowed suffragettes to challenge traditional gender roles while appearing to conform to them. Women strategically presented flowers to male politicians or opponents as a seemingly gentle gesture while making bold demands for equality. This subversion turned a traditional symbol of feminine defiance into a tool of resistance. In marches and rallies, suffragettes carried bouquets or wore flowers in their hat, creating a striking contrast between their peaceful appearance and the violent opposition they face. This juxtaposition helped them claim the moral high ground. The suffragettes also embraced gardening and horticulture as metaphors for nurturing societal change. By claiming space in these traditionally male-dominated fields, women asserted their capabilities and independence. Cultivating plants symbolized their larger goal: growing a society where women had equal rights and opportunities. Floral imagery featured prominently in their artwork and media, softening the movement's radical image while conveying its message of renewal and progress towards equality. Through their creative use of plants and flowers, the suffragettes merged traditional femininity with radical political action. They transformed nature's beauty into a language of resistance, using it to communicate, unify, and challenge the status quo. The story of how suffragettes used plants as symbols in their fight for equality demonstrates that inspiration and tools for resistance can be found everywhere, even in a simple flower. While suffragettes wielded flowers as symbols in their fight for political rights, women in India took direct action, physically embracing trees to protect their communities and livelihoods. The Chipko movement stands as one of history's most powerful examples of women-led environmental activism, where the simple act of hugging trees became a profound form of resistance against commercial deforestation and ecological destruction. The movement traces its roots to 1730 when Amrita Devi, a woman from Rajasthan, stood against the Maharaja of Jodhpur who had ordered trees to be cut down in her village of Kejarli. In a tragic yet inspiring act of defiance, Amrita and 363 members of her tribe were beheaded as they hugged the trees to prevent their destruction. Their sacrifice was not in vain. The Maharaja subsequently banned tree cutting in the area, marking one of the earliest recorded victories of women-led environmental resistance. The spirit of resistance re-emerged in the 1970s when deforestation threatened communities across India. Forests were rapidly cleared for logging and commercial development, causing ecological damage and disrupting traditional ways of life. In the Himalayan foothills, a village community led by Gaura Devi took a courageous stand against loggers. The name Chipko, meaning to cling or to hug in Hindi, reflected their method of resistance, embracing trees to prevent their felling. This act of defiance spread across India and gained international recognition. The Chipko movement is widely regarded as the first eco-feminist movement linking women's rights with environmental protection. While men participated and held leadership roles, women formed the backbone of this resistance. As primary stewards of agrarian economies, they were most directly affected by deforestation and environmental degradation. Their intimate connection to the land made them natural defenders of the forests that sustained their communities. Through their activism, they not only protected their environment but also reshaped forest management policies in India and inspired global conservation efforts. Over time, this tradition of women using plants as tools of resistance evolved to address new challenges. By the 1990s, the fight shifted from deforestation to corporations attempting to patent traditional plant knowledge. At the forefront was Dr. Vandana Shiva, a physicist turned environmental activist who led a decade-long campaign to stop a multinational company from patenting the neem tree. This struggle was not just about a tree. It was about protecting centuries of wisdom passed down by women and preventing corporations from claiming ownership of community knowledge. The neem tree has been integral to life in South Asia for centuries, with women as its primary guardians. They used it in medicine, farming, and daily life, deriving power and independence from this deep plant knowledge. However, colonial rulers and corporations repeatedly sought to exploit this wisdom for profit. In 1995, an American company attempted to patent neem-based products, threatening to restrict local farmers and healers from using the tree they had relied on for generations. Dr. Shiva fought back, leading a movement that ultimately overturned the patent. Her declaration, "The tree is free at last," symbolized more than a legal victory. It affirmed women's plant knowledge as a form of resistance, echoing the effort of midwives, healers, and farmers who had safeguarded traditional wisdom for centuries. The battle continues. Across South Asia, corporations target plants for patenting, threatening traditional knowledge. Dr. Shiva has urged communities, especially women, to document their plant wisdom and defend their rights as custodians of biodiversity. From Amrita Devi's sacrifice in 1730 to Dr. Shiva's Neem campaign, women have led the fight to protect nature. In a world facing climate crisis and corporate exploitation, their knowledge is more vital than ever. By defending ancient plant wisdom, they preserve not only traditions but also biodiversity, healing practices, and the rights of entire communities. The thread connecting Indigenous healers, medieval wise women, Irish famine survivors, suffragettes, and Indian environmental activists is one of profound resilience. Today, as we confront environmental crisis and ongoing threats to women's autonomy, the compelling stories of these women offer powerful inspiration and insight. When women protect their relationship with plants, they safeguard both biodiversity and cultural diversity, preserving traditional wisdom that offers sustainable alternatives to exploitative systems. In a world dominated by industrial agriculture and pharmaceutical monopolies, the knowledge of women stands as a radical alternative, prioritizing relationships over ownership and community well-being over profit. Their legacy invites us to reconsider our relationship with the natural world and recognize that in protecting plants, we protect our collective future. Thank you for tuning into Roots Revealed. Support the show by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform and sharing episodes with friends and family. If you have any feedback or suggestions, reach out to me at hello@rootsrevealed.org. Remember to keep exploring your roots and celebrating the rich diversity of our shared history. See you next time. Bye.